Well, guys, we can start now. I'm going to talk to you about a little about Rife history. We usually use these machines, and sometimes we don't have the idea how they were built or what's the main idea or the history of the actual person that discovered all these. And it's very interesting. I'm going to make this as fun and as easy as we can do. Of course, history, it's a little boring, but I will try to make it my best to be spontaneous and easy to understand. It's very interesting, the story, really, really interesting. I believe we're going to see some methods that are used now by the big pharma and still using them around now. And you're going to see a lot of things that you usually see when there is a very good thing in the market and the people try to shut it down. So we'll start. Okay. Well, the first part of all this journey is my name is James. I'm a lawyer. I'm actually just turned 47 years old. I'm a criminal lawyer, and I've been in this path for as long as 2 years. I have a Spooky2 clinic in Mexico, and it's not a side business, maybe just a side leisure time. I have this clinic to help people. Okay, that's the main idea of the clinic I run in Mexico. Now we're going to talk about Dr. Royal Raymond Rife. You can see the picture. You will see these pictures over and over and over on internet. But I look for them pictures and want to make sure we can have the whole history about it. Royal Raymond Rife was a scientist. He was born in 1888 and died in 1971 in a very sad way. He also stood at Johns Hopkins for medicine, and he developed a technology that's usually today is used for optics, electronics, radiochemistry, biochemistry, ballistics, and aviation. Also, he received 4 major awards and honors, and was given the honorary doctorate by the University of Heidelberg for his work. So basically, besides being a very brilliant, if we didn't recognize him for the Rife machine, he will be recognized by all his work in the field of optics, microscopes, chemistry, ballistics. He was really, really a great person, very, very smart. In the records, he was actually living in South Iowa. And since his very beginning, he has this troubled life. He was raised by his aunt and uncle because his mother died very shortly after he was conceived. And his father was working the whole time, so he didn't have time to take care of him. Then in the early 19th, Rife moved to San Diego. And this is very important. In 1912, he was married to a Chinese-American woman named Mamie A. Queen. This is going to be very important to the end of his life. He was also known as a musician. You will see this picture a lot also in the internet, grabbing a guitar. And also he was very well educated in the field of optics, electronics, biology, and chemistry. Why optics? Because he used to work for the brand Carl Zeiss, the one that make the lenses for all these cameras. So he has a very, very big knowledge of optics, which in more time become the greatest microscope was ever built until his time. Okay, so he studied, as I told you before, in Johns Hopkins to be a eye surgery. Now, to the right, you will see a picture by his working on a microscope. And this is very important because, as I told you, from 1904 to 1908, he worked with Hans Lockel for the Carl Zeiss optical. And then he has this thing. He wanted to be the first person to see a microorganism alive, because by the time he was studying and making his optics for the microscopes, the technology was not able to show a microorganism, a virus or a bacteria alive. You have to have them killed in order to see them in the microscope. So he established in 1912 his first laboratory in San Diego, California. Then in 1930, he invented what was the super microscope, which enabled him to see for the very first time in the microbe what was a bacteria and a virus. He was actually the first person to see them alive. Also, in his history of life, he was very involved with cancer. We will talk about it in a second. He called the cancer BX, Bacillus X, and BY, Bacillus Y. One was for the sarcoma and one was for the carcinoma. Rife used in his microscope a light that was designed to stain the natural color of these pathogens. Also, he zapped the microscope with energy, so he was able to see how they move, how they were alive, and he will not kill them. Here are some examples of what Rife discovered and the pictures that was very impressive for the time of these viruses, bacteria, taken for the first time with a microscope. As you can see, there's a algas. Then you have this is a Escherichia coli seen through Rife microscope. The specimen was stained with a dye to create Rife. And then to the right was the Salmonella in transition to a filterable state, showing 3 filterable granules instead of the usual one. This is very important because, as you can see, Rife will be remembered because of the microscopes. He was a revolutionary person in this field. Now, something really important is in the internet, they use this word, the quackery. But everything we're going to talk about was everything was recorded and being published in the time being by different newspapers. As you can see, here is another part talking about the world's biggest microscopes in San Diego, the image of Dr. Rife there. Now, continuing with this was very important. In 1938, he built 4 models for microscopes, each one more precise and more powerful than before. Imagine this, in 1940, he was able to magnify 60,000 times the human eye. So it was really, really unbelievable. You can see this in the San Diego Union news article. In those years, Mr. Rife was working using instruments capable of delivering electromagnetic frequencies. And he was wondering, he has this idea, what will happen if I subject these microorganisms to these frequencies? And that was the beginning of the Rife machine, actually. Now, between 1921 and 1922, he built the first machine capable of delivering these electromagnetic frequencies. He called his machines Rife 1, the Rife 1, Rife 2, Rife 3, so on. And then in that time, he was assisted by the man in the picture who's called Lee De Forest, who was the father of the modern electronic tubes, which was gave importance to the contribution of the radio frequencies. Let me explain this a little more. In order to travel these frequencies to the body, Rife thought that the best way to send these frequencies to our body was using this plasma tube, using noble gases like argon or helium. And basically, those were a small antenna, cheaper than a normal radio FM or AM antenna, that could deliver these frequencies through air and could reach our body. That was so important to his discovery, and that is why he joined with Lee Forest in this part. Now, after Dr. Rife discovered this simple electromagnetic wave was not enough to destroy a microorganism, he went to a radio frequencies, as I told you before, and it was accepted by the body and have no negative impact in the body. And this is very important. If you heard or you've seen any other information about Rife, you will see something called the MOR, M-O-R. This means the mortal oscillatory rate created by resonance. Let me explain also what's resonance. Resonance is the phenomena when you have a frequency that another body, another, in this case, metal, for example, can hear. And if both of them are in the same tune, they'll start vibrating in the same moment and at the same time. So basically, what we was trying to find, Mr. Rife, is that more enable to resonance all these bacteria and viruses so much until they break themselves. Okay? This is called coordinative resonance. To explain this principle, one take an example of two tuning forks to set to an absolute value. The moment one is stimulated, the other one will resonate or resound. He thought that with that stimulation of an electrical frequency able to pass through the human tissue, it was possible to devitalize the bacteria without damaging in any way the organs of the cells invested, which instead have much higher resonance frequency. Dr. Rife considered a disease can be cured when he could destroy a microorganism 10 consecutive times using its more. According to his surviving records, he determined that the more for at least 24 microorganisms. This is very important and very astonishing. Those microorganisms he found was tuberculosis, anthrax, cholera, tetanus, E. coli, influenza, spinal meningitis, pneumonia, syphilis, gonorrhea, leprosy, streptococcus, conjunctivitis, bubonic plague, Staphylococcus, diphtheria, and typhoid. Imagine a guy that discovered all these in the 40s, 1940s. And he basically discovered how to cure all these diseases that until our time, they're still here. Okay, imagine how important was his discovery. Now, this is very important. He has this issue with cancer. So he was also trying to discover the MOR for the cancer for the VX and the VY virus. So viewing the carcinoma virus, Rife was usually successful by viewing this microorganism. Initially, he had a trouble detecting the carcinoma virus. One day, he serendipitously placed a tube of cancer culture inside his electric glass ring, filled with an argon gas, which is a noble gas, and left it there for about 24 hours. When he later examined the culture through his microscope, he noticed that he had acquired a purple-fresh color in the mated visible. Remarkably, this specimen was still living. That was the first time you actually make in vitro cells of cancer. So he discovered a sustained method for the cancer virus with some frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum, and he was not able to kill him without killing him. Why was this important? Because after he managed to find these frequencies, then he used that cancer cells with mice, and he grew them tumors inside the mice. And guess what? With the right machine, he fight those tumors and bring the mice with any cancer back, which was obviously incredible for the time and still for the time being. As I told you before, everything was documented by the newspapers of the era. You can see here the Evening Tribune with the headline, Dread Diseases Germs Destroyed by Race, Claim of San Diego Scientist. And that says, cancer blown seen after 18-year toil by Rife. That's on May 6, 1938. So his discoveries were really important at the time. And everything and everyone was believing in him. So I'm going to talk a little more about this diapositive. Was that in 1934, the trial started at De La Jolla, California, with a series of potential cancer and tuberculosis. In this hospital, the first clinical cancer work was started, established under a special committee of the medical research of the University of Southern California, under supervision of Johnson himself. The trial involved, this is very important, 16 terminal cancer patients. After 3 months, 14 of these Desperate cases were declared as clinical healed by the staff of 5 doctors, in which Dr. Albert Gifford was the pathologist of the group. After another 130 days, following a change introduced in the treatment, even the last 2 patients were healed. The treatments consisted in application of electromagnetic waves for a duration of 180 seconds, basically 2 minutes, using a Rife rate 3 set at the deadly frequency for the BX, that's the carcinoma virus, at intervals of 3 days. So this is important. He only used the machines for 180 seconds for 3 days. So when they on, off, basically. It was found that this time spent between the 2 treatments led to better results in that case treated daily. Why I'm making this point very big? Because we usually, when we want to treat ourselves or any family or a loved one with the Rife machine, we want to treat him every single day with the plasma machine. So the best solution is just 1 day on, off. Remember, in a previous webinar I talked about the Herxing effect, when you Herx. So this will happen here. You need to make the liver and your body detox, but are you healing? That's why you should not be treating a person 24/7 all the time. Leave him time to heal, leave him time to rest. This is basically when you are healing. If you're using frequencies for healing, then these switch around and these change a little. Now, this is the same as before, but here the importance is that after 90 days of treatment, the committee concluded that 86.5% of the patient had been completely cured. The treatment was then adjusted, and the remaining 13.5% of the patients also responded within the next 4 weeks. So he was able to cure cancer in 1934, and up to our days, it's still possible. I'm going to make a small parenthesis here to tell you part of my story here with cancer in my clinic. So far, using Spooky2 machines and a protocol I designed, I have already cured 5 people with cancer, and they are nets, and it's incredible. I can tell you it worked for me. I'm not sure it will work for everybody, but so far it has been done, so we can assure his discovery is still working. It's very important because even if you can save just 1 life, you are doing something incredible. And I can tell you, if you follow a protocol by using this Rife technology, I will get back to the part when someone is in the commentary says they were using scans. I usually use only scans, and then I use the Rife machine, Spooky2 Rife machine with plasma to deliver those frequencies 1 day on, 1 day off, and on the day off, I usually use a remote to send those frequencies also to the same person. And if you get involved into what Dr. Rife used for his treatment, he used to use extra stuff to make the liver detox faster. That's basically what I do in the clinic, along with other stuff I use for doing this. But I can tell you it worked. It's incredible. And I have some doctors that have already sent some audios to their people doing chemistry, chemotherapy, and all that, without believing what's going on, because people with, for example, lung cancer took 3 months, 3.5 months to be okay. Okay. Of course, there's something important here. I cannot claim or suggest, this is very important because I'm not a doctor, to stop doing your doctor's recommendations. You can use Spooky2 or any other Rife machines you want along with your treatment, and in the road you can see the results and then you can decide. But your obligation and my obligation is to suggest you to still stick to the doctor's advice. This is something I have to do. Remember, I'm a lawyer. Okay, now after these results that were so incredible, and this is a very funny picture, it's called the cure for all diseases. This picture was taken in 1931, and you can see there 44 of the nation's most respected medical authorities honored Royal Rife with a banquet till the end of all diseases in the Pasadena state of Dr. Milbank Johnson. So basically, all the most important people in the science medicine field of that time were in the same road with Mr. Royal Rife, as you can see this picture here. Around 1936, Dr. Rife realized his Ray 2 device was too large and he needed to make a more manageable one. Why? Because Dr. Royal Rife believed that these machines should be used at home, not only at hospitals. And if you take into consideration that maybe 95% or maybe 90% of all diseases come from virus, bacteria, or fungus, and you can make them resonance until they are dead. Basically, you have discovered the cure for almost everything, okay? So why not to give this to the people? So they don't have to go to a hospital and being there for a long time. If you have been in a hospital, you know how horrible is being there. Even the hospital is real nice, doesn't matter, you're still in a hospital. So he started to manage to make his machine smaller, so he can sell it. And he can sell it because he can help people. And also, he can make a business, which is totally legit and normal. Sorry, I was reading a message. Paul, remember this message to me, please, after we'll finish this guide, please. Okay, so Dr. Rife concentrated on an individual who understood his invention and went to manufacture it to the device to where it was more compact and remain the same efficient. And that person was Philip Hoyland, was an electric engineer who lived in Altadena, California. Then Royal Rife and Hoyland formed the Beam Ray Corporation with the idea of making and distributing these machines to clinicians, physicians, and Hoyland made the whole of the machine, maybe all of them, and that's the way the business started to begin and work for them. Now, as I told you before, Rife called his machine Rife Ray number 3, 4, and 5, and that's the way he went on. That was an image of the Royal Rife number 3 machine. Now, here is a treatment room. You can see the bed, and the machine is basically here and here, all the cables. That's basically how we start. Now, if you get the idea, basically I finished this part of the first presentation when the business is starting to become a business, and Rife was going really well. Now let's understand a little about the machine. Dr. Rife has said that every cell has a frequency. Sick cells have a lower frequency than a healthy cell. When the right frequency matches the frequency of the sick cell, it resonates the cell until it explodes. Then, along with the herbs and diet, this is important because Rife, that was the way Rife used it. The liver and the kidney are detox. Remember, we talked about the Herxheimer effect. That's Herxheimer effect. The Rife instrument, along with this diet, assures no recurrence of any disease. This instrument will attack any foreign virus within the body, and we can provide you with the list of all this frequency to match these diseases. Where, of course, with Spooky2, you have a huge list of alignments you can treat. It's impressive. It's really impressive. Okay, now we're gonna make stop in the Rife history. All the good part so far was really great. And now here comes the sad part, where the big pharma gets in. This guy you see there, maybe a little crazy there, his name is Maurice Fishbane. He had acquired the entire stock of the American Medical Association, also known as the AMA, by 1934. And obviously, he didn't want Rife to sell these machines. Why? Because if you can heal from harm from maybe 90% of all the illness, then there is no logic for the American Medical Association or the big pharma to be there. Because sadly but true, their business is not to heal, is to treat people. If you treat people, the people could continue with the illness a long time, and there's a business. So he sent a lawyer with an offer Rife cannot refuse. Of course, Rife did refuse this offer, and here started all the trouble in the world with Rife and this guy. First, his lab was vandalized, and they destroyed his microscopes and all his info about all the microscopes. Then the police illegally confiscated the remainder rights of his 3-year research. And then in 1939, agents of the family, which controlled the drug industry, assisted by Philip Hoyland in a frivolous lawsuit against his own partners in the baby corporation. So this guy, Maurice Fishman, managed to turn around Hoyland against him and make a lawsuit. And they trashed his lab, they trashed all his instruments, they trashed all his research. So Rife was in real trouble. And if you remember, the Beam Ray Corporation was the one that was responsible for selling this machine. So if this corporation wasn't a fight, then machines were not built. There was no business, more money for Rife, so he cannot continue with his investigation. And basically, you cannot continue with living. Okay. So Hoyland at the very end, lost. But I'm a lawyer. I know about law firms. In this process, you spend money, spend time, spend resources, and you spend a lot of your mental health. So Rife was really bad at the end of this fight. So what happened after this? The doctor could try to defend Rife. Imagine this. They lost their foundation grants and the hospital privilege. So basically, all the industry was against Rife right now because he didn't want to sell his machine. So continue with this persecution. Then Dr. Arthur Kendall, the director of the Northwest School of Medicine, and this was very important because he worked with Dr. Rife on the VX cancer virus. Remember, we talked about how you find the VX, the Bacillus X frequencies. Well, then he accepted almost $250,000 of 1940. We're talking about lots of money. And then he suddenly retired to Mexico. Then Dr. George Dock was also silenced with an enormous grant, along with the highest honors of the American Medical Association that could give. So you see this big complot against Rife. And as I told you before, everything is documented. So it's not a story I'm just inventing. If you want, you can go to the newspapers and find all this stuff. Also, the lawsuits are in court, so you can see everything. Okay. Now, the medical journals support almost entirely by the drug company, and the revenues are controlled by the American Medical Association. And then these medical journals refuse to publish any paper by anyone's on Rife therapy. Therefore, all the generation of doctors that were into school in these times, they graduate without ever knowing anything about Royal Rife. So the persecution was entirely big against Rife. As I told you before, it was just trying to destruct all his work. I put this image back again because in 1939, Dr. Royal Rife device was declared illegal. And most of these 44 doctors that worked with him in this picture, acclaimed him 8 years earlier. They denied ever having met him. Imagine this. Some incidents such as this and as the destruction of his laboratory, the killing of some of people close to him, and the destruction of all his documentation in his possession convinced Rife to put an end in his research. Imagine how strong was the, the, the American Medical Association to make all these people in this photo with him suddenly said, we don't know you, we don't want to be in court with you, we have nothing to do with you. Okay? Now this comes to the sad part, how this story ends. Well, in 1938, Rice formed a corporation called Beam Rice Incorporated in Hoyland. 1 year later, because some shady business going on in the sale of his shares and some other reasons, the corporation was sued to court, as I told you before. Once the trial began, Rice was totally isolated by the American Medical Association and its members. This trial completely frustrated him and ended in a tragedy. In this battle, Rife almost lost everything, including his corporation and support for the scientific community. And after a trial, Rife began to use alcohol to calm his nerves. This was really sad and was actually the very end of his life. In the court case in 1939 was a disaster for Rife's career. Then, some years later, in 1957, will be something worse. In that year, 1957, his wife died. After 45 years with him, she was married with him in 1912, and since then, she has been his greatest support during his ups and downs in all those years. Because of this, Rife started to drink more and more. So he has two major issues. He lost his money, his company, his invention. He lost his wife. So alcohol become part in the equation. So now this blows from his career and life, knocked his scientific genius down and carried him to drinking probably to the end. Late in life, Rife began to take Valium. If you know, Valium and alcohol are not very good friends. And he's sometimes drinking, he used Valium to sleep. So sadly, on August 11 of 1971, at the Grossman Hospital in El Cajon, California, he died 83 years old after a heart attack caused by the overdose of the combination of alcohol and Valium. So believe it or not, his genius died this way, just by doing good to the people. It's impressive how modern life works, and how sad can be this story, but it's real. And that's how Mr. Royal Rife life ended, with a overdose of alcohol and Valium. Now, for fortune, his death was not with everything lost. A few humanitarian doctors and engineers reconstructed his frequency instruments and kept his genius alive. Right technology became public knowledge again in 1986 with the publication of The Cancer Cure That Worked. This book, you can buy it on Amazon. Very great lecture. If you want to know more about this, how it works, buy this. You need to read this. By Barry Lines, another material about Royal Rife and his monumental work. I'm going to leave this second so you can have this book. It's very important to read it. I believe you can find it even in PDF, maybe for free on the internet. I don't know, but buy it and read it. Now, here's something really important that for me is basically one of the way to talk about the man, okay? How he can talk about himself. Remember, we were talking about 1939. Let me go back. 38, 39, and he died in 71. This was done in 1967. Imagine a man who says this: having spent every dime I earned in my research for the benefit of mankind, I have ended up as a pauper, but I achieved the impossible and will do it again. So this guy was really, really a stand-up man. This is really, really important. That's the picture of it. So you can see this guy, you're talking about a guy with all these principles, these values, and basically with the main idea to help people in the world. So that's why I wanted to make this webinar, like a tribute to this guy, because he'll help so many people. I have seen it. And it's valuable to know that his machines and the work, like for example, John White in Spooky and all the other guys in the world that make drive machines, they are helping people like these guys want to do, like this genius wanted to do. So it's important to know that's in our hands to continue this legacy, to continue studying and helping ourselves and any other people. Okay. Well, now I'm going to talk a little how this merge and combines with Spooky2. As you know, we, the host of these webinars, are not related to Spooky. Okay. I like Spooky because I use Spooky. Okay. I was not paid for to use them and bring you anything of this. If you can see other webinars, I started with Spooky because of my wife. She got cancer, she died. I found Spooky and the Rife machines in a very late stage of her cancer. And that's why I'm doing this, okay, because I want to help other people. So I can tell you, first of all, that Spooky2, it's basically one of the cheapest Rife machines you can have. And this is not bad, okay? We have in this Western philosophy of living in Mexico, US, Canada, Europe. We like to think in China like a cheap country, and they are not cheap. They can build anything you want, from very expensive to very non-expensive stuff. And I can tell you Spooky2 is actually very good. I'm a user, I have great support of them. And I'm doing these webinars because I like to learn. I believe that the way to learn more and more and more is by your questions. And I'm preparing myself for these webinars, so I need to study. And I have all these ideas in my mind, so I can learn more and more from you than you actually can learn from me because of you. So in my research, I found several machines. I'm not, I can talk about them. And there were 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe 4,000 more expensive than Spooky2. I have them actually still in my clinic, but they do less or the same as Spooky. You ask me, find a cure for what you know. Well, yes, there are cure for that also. These machines were so expensive that they are not giving back the idea of Rife, original machine. And something very important you need to know, Rife didn't want to call his machines a Rife machine. They called him Rife Ray, whatever. But he didn't want to put just a Rife machine, okay? So why I'm saying this is because the machines are cheaper, but they do work really, really good. I've been in a lot of forums and they usually talk, oh, they're Chinese, they don't work. No, they do work. You need to study them and use them properly. That's important, of course. And sometimes can be frustrated or different. But believe me, with some time and the use of the forum or these webinars, you can manage to use the machines very well. And I can tell you from my own experience that in the last 2 years, me, my mother, my kids have never been with a doctor anymore. Not because we don't want to or we don't need them, because the machine has helped us. And it's a cumulus of stuff. Maybe the thought that the machine is working perfectly, and maybe the actual reality, the machine is working perfectly, combined with the trust, it will work. Well, now going back to Spooky, in March 2011, when experienced Rife user and experimenter Johann Stegman experienced something that changed the course of his life. After buying a new Rife machine, Johann's friends made this astounding claim that the DNA containing fingernails or hair could transmit energy frequencies directly to the owner of that DNA, simply by placing the samples between the machine's electrodes, without applying the usual contacts to the skin's person. Johann was skeptical, but together with his friend decided to test the story in his daughter, Tanya. who is particularly sensitive to energy. To this astonishment, he discovered that worked perfectly. How do you explain this phenomenon? Albert Einstein called spooky action at a distance. Modern physicists call it quantum entanglement. So this is basically spooky breakthrough. Why? Because Spooky was the one that invented, started, discovered that you can heal with your nails. Of course, Royal Rife didn't hear about it, or didn't believe about it, or didn't knew what's going to happen with this machine. I can tell you, in my clinic, more than heal with your nails very easily, and it works. It's not as fast, it's not nearly, I want to use the word, it's not nearly as fast as using a plasma, but it worked. It really, really worked. So give yourself a chance, use the remotes as well as the plasma if you have enough money. But that's the way to go. Okay, plasma remotes for me are the best. I'll just use contacts for scans, both for healing and killing, remotes and plasma. That's the way to go. Now, developments with increasing interest and excitement. And after some discussion with Johan and Hank, John decided he will write a new software package that will not embrace the functionality of the right USB, but it will allow up to 126 frequency generators to be run in a single PC. That software was the original Spooky2, or Spooky software, designed primarily as a remote Rife system. It could also be used as a simple contact or plasma device when coupled with an amplifier. So what's the main part of Spooky? Well, this discovery, and I told you at the beginning of this webinar, Spooky2 software. Spooky2 software is great to deliver these frequencies to your body. So John has made this great software. If you can run it, you will see the database and all this. And I can tell you there's a big discussion in the forums, is these frequencies work or not? Because if you remember in the beginning of our presentation, I talked about the MOR, the mortal oscillating rates that Rife discovers. Those were the only real rates, okay? And after this happened, with the aid of all these interests in the body and the Rife machines, we have discovered more rates. Now, the big question is, do these rates work or they don't work? There is no way to know it. There are some users who claims they don't work and they are just gimmicks. And then this user who says they do work. What I can say is that in my clinic, I follow these methods. And for me, in my clinic, it works. When a patient goes to the clinic, I make a scan, okay? The scan, the way I do it, the way I found the best to do it is using a Spooky2 boost in the Spooky2 generator. Then I connect the pads to the Spooky2 boost. I do not go personally without the boost. I usually prefer doing with the boost. I connect the pads and I get 10 frequencies. After I got these frequencies, then I analyze these frequencies in 3 different ways. I analyze using current, I analyze them using angle, and then I analyze them using current and angle. So this will give me 30 frequencies. Why I do this? Because this is the way to address these frequencies in 3 different ways. So you can have basically all the, not the possibilities, but the most possibilities to get all the frequencies that will work with your body. Now I have these 30 frequencies, then I run them in the plasma. 3 minutes each one, that will go for the 180 minutes, as Dr. Rife stated in his beginning of his studies. So this will make an hour and a half. So that's the time a patient should remain in my clinic with the use of the machines and the plasma. After the patient is gone, I get these 30 frequencies I got previously analyzed with the Spooky2 generator X, and I make a program and I put them on the remote. And I continue giving this patient remote therapy 24/7 until the next scan happens. When this next scan is going to happen, as Dr. Rife states, I scan every 48 hours. But in the meantime, I continue giving these frequencies to the people, to the person, with the Spooky2 remote. In conjunction with these frequencies, what do I do? In other remote, I search for all the frequencies that are listed on the Spooky2 software that are related to that illness. And I put that in another remote, and I just leave them 24/7. And in other remote, I put programs for detox. For example, could be a terrain, or for blood purification, or liver, or whatever on the third remote. So basically, for a patient, I need one plasma machine, and at least I need 3 remotes. That's my main use for one patient. It has worked for me. You can try them. I'm telling you what I do. That's no science. It took me a year to find these forums, have these mentors, these great mentors that have taught me everything I knew. And that's the way I do it. Now I'm going to talk about Spooky2 products. The plasma machine with the fan tube that was used with Dr. Dr. Rife, sorry. You can have the whole thing here because this Spooky2 Central works basically with all these gadgets you can see here in the picture. Or this is the cheapest, at least the cheapest I found, and it's the best you can have. Okay, if you have money, invest in this. If you are something about budget, well, I told you about the remotes, how the remotes work with the DNA. I also told you about them. You can have also the electrodes, which are also very great solution to buy a Spooky2 plasma or a remote. You can go with the electrodes. They are very, very good also. And here is a photo of the biofeedback using the sample digitizer also. And the, which is not more for sale, but you can have the GNX Pro. You know how this works. You can have this back. I really love to have it here. This is very good motivation for me to keep learning and trying to help you. And see you then in a later new webinar we can have. And thank you for everything. I hope my English is getting better every day. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you all, guys.